ensuring that the group that goes over are culturally aware of simple things, because the women and children are going to have big stories. But if a man walks up and offers to shake their hand, they're going to be insulted and not feel like speaking. So will you be taking precautions to make sure that people are culturally aware so that people feel free to talk?
Yes, we have started to put out some of those cultural issues on a Q&A sheet for everybody who is considering going, and certainly for everybody going, about how to dress modestly. I would love your suggestions on other things that can be added, but we are going to have a day before we go where the Pakistanis will tell us about what are culturally sensitive issues and how people should behave. And we have told everybody going on the trip that this isn't like any other trip. You can't go wander off on your own. You can't go do your own thing. You are part of a group, and you're supposed to listen to what our hosts are telling us. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up.
I got one. I don't know if anybody else is involved in Code Pink, but Medea has a great voice. And I have a song here. I'd love to hear her sing. It's by Betsy Rose, if you know, if anybody wants to help sing. She won't sing unless we have other people singing. Does anybody want to sing?
Wait, we have one more question over there. I want to hear from our Canadian friend.
I can't. Who's he?
We can't hear.
I don't know what the state of drone warfare is in Canada. We have a Me Too government, so I'm certain that it's happening. So everything you're doing here will be very important for us as it becomes public in Canada. There's something very interesting going on in Canada, which relates to what you were talking earlier about how the anti-war movement needs to connect up with the other social movements to become a force, and that's been the student strike in Quebec. The post-secondary institutions have been on strike in Quebec since the month of February. The government had to suspend the school year in May because they simply couldn't deal with the strike. In their heart of heart, I suppose they hoped it would just go away, but it's not. School will resume on August 17th. The students have been having demonstrations on the 22nd of every month since March, and they had 400,000 people in the streets of Montreal on May 22nd. And then, because it's a summer break, well, they only had 80,000 people in the month of July. But August 22nd will be a couple of days after the school year resumes, so the numbers will grow again. There's a provincial election that will be called very shortly, and so the government is hoping to get re-elected. Seems unlikely. What's been remarkable about the student movement is how they are concerned first and foremost about tuition fees, but have been addressing very strongly, the progressive wing, I could say, perhaps of the movement, have been addressing very strongly issues of healthcare, because even though we have a public healthcare system in Canada, it's constantly being attacked and eroded. Environmental issues, and I would say to a growing extent, concerns around war and peace. There is a big concern in Canada that this student movement in Quebec is spread like wildfire across the country, and students across the country are looking at it very closely, figuring out how can we do something like this. It's not going to happen in the short term because the student strike in Quebec is a result of what was called the Quiet Revolution in the 1960s, really the equivalent of the civil rights movement in Canada that affected Quebec because it's an oppressed nation in Canada. And so there are very deeply rooted social values that were created by the Quiet Revolution that's what the student strike is about. People say healthcare is a right, free education is a right, looking after the environment is a responsibility, and so on. But it is coming, and so for us it's a great source of inspiration because we don't quite have the direct connection yet to the large numbers and issues of war and peace. But this student movement is shaking up the politics of the country. Our governing party, which is the right-wing party, is now second in the polls, in part because of what the student strike has been accomplishing. So it's just something that I think we can take encouragement from, because I look at what you present, it just seems too powerful, it's too overwhelming. These people have all the money, they got all the guns, but you know what? In the end, they'll suffer the same fate as the previous governments did in Vietnam. It's a matter of time, and the sooner we can get there, and then the quicker that we can connect up with these people that are affected by all the stuff that's going on. And in your case, I think probably the big example has been the Occupy movement. I feel optimistic about it, even though it's very painful to look at what people are having to go through before we get to that society of justice that we would like to have.
Well, thank you for that. very inspiring to see all these young people out on the streets, and I know many of us wish that we would have the same kind of numbers of young people in this country, and given the cost of tuition, which is way more than it is in Canada, there's all the more reason for young people to be out on the streets in this country. I know you've had your hand up for a while. Maybe we could end with your...
Yes, I wonder if it'd be feasible to extend the boycott, divest, sanction movement to include domestic manufacturers of the drones and their components.
Well, yes, and I think this relates very much about how do you build some kind of power as a movement, and the power of the purse is a very strong one. It's not like you can go into a store and buy a product of Boeing and Northrop Grumman, so it's a little harder. On the other hand, every major institution has investments, and this is particularly useful, I think, for getting university students involved, because there's two ways. There's one, there's a lot of universities that have direct contracts with the military for this, and so trying to expose those and sever those. But then there's all the investments that the universities have themselves. So that's something in the fall that we're looking into and trying to get going on campuses. But there's all kinds of other institutions that have investments in these companies, and that's a great way to do it. So I think there is obviously no one way, but what we are building is much more awareness, and I think we're making it hard for these manufacturers to continue with this meme that these weapons are so great. There was a piece put out by the Associated Press recently that talked about all this concern bubbling up about drones right now, and it quoted a Republican congressman from Louisiana who said, you know, I never heard from my constituents about drones, and now I even go into Walmart and people are coming up to me and saying, what about these drones? So we are reaching into middle America. People are starting to question. And then in today's New York Times, there was a piece by Thomas Friedman that talked about how we have no money for these wars, and that since that many of us are becoming the baby boomer generation that is going to take up so much money from health care, and along with that comes a lot of people without Alzheimer's, he's saying maybe we'll just forget about the wars. So there is hope maybe in strange places. And I don't know what to do about this song, because I think maybe we should, really? Should we sing or should we wrap up?
Sing.
All right, I don't know what the song is.
It's Home on the Range is the tune. Home on the Range.
And this might be a little hokey, so bear with us.
It's beautiful.
We need to share. We only have a few copies here. People with a strong